Hi, welcome to Danny After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight will be part 2 of the case of Ronald DeFeo Jr. If you missed part 1, go back and catch up so you know just where we left off. Now, for part 2, let's go ahead and dive on in. Butch, now after completing the murders, cleaned himself up to establish an alibi and to throw the police investigation off its trail. He showered, trimmed his beard, and dressed in his jeans and work boots. He then collected his bloodied clothing and the rifle and wrapped them in a pillowcase and headed out to his car. He threw the evidence in the car and drove into Brooklyn. He disposed of the pillowcase and its contents into a storm drain. He then returned to Long Island and reported to work at his grandfather's Buick dealership by 6 o'clock a.m. as usual. Butch called home several times while he was at work because his father failed to show up for work. He acted as though he was bored with nothing to do, so he left around noon. Butch called his girlfriend, Sherry Klein, to let her know he would be home early from work and that he wanted to stop by first and see her. On his way back into Amityville, Butch passed his friend, Bobby Kelsky. The two of them stopped to talk. After, Butch proceeded on to Sherry's house. He arrived there around 1:30 p.m. Upon arriving, Butch casually mentioned that he had tried to call his house several times, and although all of the cars were in the driveway, there was no response. Nobody was answering the phone. To demonstrate this to Sherry, he called his home from Sherry's apartment using her phone, and same result. Nobody picked up the phone. Butch then took Sherry shopping for the rest of the afternoon. From the mall in Massapequa, they then drove back to his friend Bobby's house. Butch said to Bobby that his family appeared to be home, but there was no answer when he tried calling them all day on the phone. Butch spent the rest of the afternoon visiting other friends, drinking and taking heroin. He finally arrived at the bar at about 6 o'clock p.m., and Bobby followed him in there shortly thereafter. Butch said to Bobby again his concern over his inability to reach anybody at his home. Butch then left the bar to go to his house because he said he wanted to check on his family. Around 6:30 p.m., he burst back into the bar and yelled, quote, "You got to help me. I think my mother and father are shot," end quote. Butch and a small group of people went to his house located at 112 Ocean Avenue. They found that his parents were, in fact, deceased. The police were called, and when the house was searched, in total, 6 members of the family were dead, all in their beds. The victims were the father, Ronald DeFeo Sr., 43 years old, his mother, Louise DeFeo, 42 years old. The children, Dawn was 18 years old, Allison was 13 years old, Mark was 12 years old, and John was 9 years old. All 6 of the victims were found laying face down in their beds with no signs of a struggle or no signs of sedatives having been used and administered to them. This led to the question, how was somebody in the house not woken up by any of the noise of the gunshots? Neighbors did not report hearing any gunshots being fired. Butch stated to the police officers that at his home the killings must have been carried out by a mob hitman, so he was taken to the local police station for his own protection. Butch began to give police his written statement. He claimed to have been home the night before, and then he stayed up until about 2 o'clock a.m. watching TV. At 4 o'clock a.m., he reported walking past the upstairs bathroom and that his brother's wheelchair was in front of the door. He also claimed that at one point he heard the toilet flush. Since he couldn't really go back to sleep, he decided to just leave the house and head to work early. He described the rest of his day, that he left work early, visited Sherry and Bobby, and drank, and tried to reach his family by telephone unsuccessfully all day. He said that when he finally went to his home to check on his family and went upstairs, that's when he discovered his parents' bodies. He then raced back downstairs, ran back to the bar he was at, where he rounded up some men who then went to confirm and then contacted the police. However, as investigators continued to examine the physical evidence, both at the crime scene and in police laboratory, Butch's account of the night and the morning didn't really add up. A crucial discovery was made around 2:30 a.m. on November 15th, when a detective making a last sweep through the DeFeo bedrooms. In Butch's bedroom, they spotted a pair of rectangular cardboard boxes. They had labels on them describing their contents: Marlin rifles, a .22 and a .35. The detectives on the case began to consider the possibility that Butch might be a suspect. At 8:45 a.m. the next morning, Butch was read his Miranda rights. Butch stated that he'd been trying to be cooperative with police all along, and that it wasn't necessary for them to read him his rights. He waived his right to counsel, all trying to prove he's an innocent witness with nothing to hide. Butch wrote down his statement. However, detectives went through it and pointed out the discrepancies with his story and with the matching or in-matching evidence. His story began to crumble. Butch continued to lie to detectives, even as his lies put him squarely in the middle of the murders. According to Butch's new version of events, he now stated 2 men came into the home and led Butch from room to room, murdering each of his family members. After pressing Butch even longer, he finally just broke down and confessed. Quote, "It all started so fast. Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast." End quote. Butch shot and killed his 6 family members at 3:15 a.m. on the morning of November 13th, 1974, with a .35 caliber rifle. Butch admitted that he had taken a bath, redressed, and discarded the blood-stained clothes and the rifle and cartridges on his way to work. October 14th, 1975, Butch's trial began. He and his defense lawyer went for the insanity defense, claiming that voices in his head had urged him to carry out the killings on his family. Dr. Zolan testified for the prosecution. He attributed Butch's behavior to antisocial personality disorder. This is when a person is fully aware of their actions and is fully able to comprehend the difference between right and wrong, but is motivated by a self-centered attitude. November 21st, 1975. Butch was found guilty on 6 counts of second-degree murder. December 4th, 1975. Butch was sentenced to 6 consecutive sentences of 25 years to life. During his time in jail, Butch has given several accounts of how the killings were carried out. All of the stories he's given are completely inconsistent. In one interview, he claimed that his mother were responsible for all of the shootings. In another interview, he claimed that his sister killed their father, then killed their distraught mother, killed the other sister, but this was before Butch then went and killed her. Butch, growing up, he had a rocky relationship with his father, but why he killed his entire family remains totally unanswered. Butch is currently still in prison, and all of his appeals to the parole board to date have been denied. And that is the case of Ronald DeFeo Jr. Thank you for sticking around for another episode of Danny After Dark. Do you have any questions on the case? We'll leave it down below. Let's be interactive. Do you have a suggestion for a case that you'd like me to cover? We'll leave it down below, and you may see it featured in an upcoming episode. Until next time, remember, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us.